A very good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America on Friday, June 5th, 2015. And this is Live Talk. I'm Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Kip Stube.
And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the government's ultimatum to vendors in all major cities in Zimbabwe to leave the streets by Sunday or risk being forcibly evicted by Monday.
To join our discussion, phone us directly at this number 001-202-619-2077 and we'll call you back.
And as usual, Live Talk goes out to Zimbabwe on our 909 medium wave frequency and on the 4930-12080 and 15460 kilohertz shortwave.
On the internet, you can find us at www.voazimbabwe.com, www.voashona.com, and www.voandebele.com.
Ini ndinothengesa mbatya onzero yekuti titengese mbatya muno munyika dziri ma-second hand clothes yekuti muno munyika hamuna industry handiti maona hamuna industry yekuti vanhu vaende kumabasa saka we have been forced kuti tibude kunze kwenyika tichinopfeka hembe dzakapfekwa kare vamwe vanhu tichibatwa sevanhu vasina nebasa rese nekuti hurumende yedu tisati tasvika kuma-elections muna 2013 hurumende yedu yakavimbisa 2 million jobs iye zvino taane more than 2 years 3 years after the election mabasa aya hakuna.
Ukuthi zokhuluma labantu bonke abathengisayo sithengisa amabhele bathengisa ama-fruit and veggies lokho kwenziwayo ukuthi asivumelani lakho ukuthi i-army ingenele isiyasithatha ukuthi i-army iyasichotha emgwaqweni lapho sithengisela khona. Thina siyasho siyacela ukuthi uhulumende asihloniphe njengabentelayo ukuthi asihloniphe ukubona singene emgwaqweni sithengise kuvunyelwe ukuthi abantu bethengise njengoba manje sivela koBulawayo sihlanganele labanye abantu abavele arrest siyahokha mama sekuthi sile mali kumbe lento esikhuthaza ukuthi sisebenze asilamali asilalo siyasebenza singabantu abazisebenza siyacela nje ukuthi uhulumende asihloniphe ukuthi sisebenze njengabantu.
Once again, thanks for joining us, and this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about vendors.
Zimbabwe's local government minister Ignatius Chombo gave street vendors operating in central business districts in towns and cities to leave or be forcibly removed by the Zimbabwe National Army.
According to government estimates, there are about 5.6 million Zimbabweans engaged in vending, mostly in the capital city, Harare, and also the second largest city, Bulawayo, Mutare, and other smaller towns. Gibbs.
Thousands of people in Zimbabwe are engaged in vending due to the current harsh economic situation in the country. If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number 001-202-619-2077 and we'll call you back. That number again 001-202-619-2077. Those with WhatsApp you can send a message on this number 1-202-465-0138. Yes, sokunjalo mfowethu.
Onguka hama dzadiwa nhasi tinoda kuti tinge tichitarisa nezve nyaya dzevanhu vari kutengesa zvinhu mumigwagwa nekuti musi wesvondo sezviri kutaurwa nehurumende ndo rinenge riri zuva rekupedzisira rekuti vanhu ava vange vabuda mumugwagwa. Vakasadaro zviri kunzi vanobviswa nechisimba. Asi tiri kunzwa kuti gurukota rinoona nezvekudzivirirwa kwenyika vaSydney Sekeramai vanenge vatiwo mauto haasi kuzopindira. Asi izvi zvinopesana nezvakataurwa nevamwe vakuru vemauto pavakaita musangano nevanotengesa mumigwagwa nemameya nemakanzura vachitiwo mauto achapindira nekuti mauto ari pasi pesangano rinozikanwa nekuti Joint Operations Command kana kuti JOC. Nekudaro zvinhu hapana anoziva kuti nemuvhuro zvinenge zvakamira sei, asi hapana kunyatsowirirana nekuti vanotengesa mugwagwa vari kuti vari kuda mabasa. Ukuwo vamwe varidzi vezvitoro vari kuti vari kuvakanganisa kuita mabasa avo ivo vemuzvitoro vachibhadhara mari dzemitero. Nekune rimwe divi magweta anorwira kodzero dzevanhu akaita sana Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights vari kuti ivo hurumende haikwanisi kushandisa mauto munyaya dzakadai. Gibbs.
Yes, ulukandaba lingalithola njani lapha likhona khona ngapho ke ngemakaya thina ngapha ke eWashington ayisiyaphila sibula kwamagama udaba ekhudwini esikhuluma ngalo namhlanje ikhona okwenzakala ezitaladini zeHarare, ezitaladini zakobulawayo khona ngapho eGweru eMtare lendaweni esijiyeneyo lapho ke okulabantu abanengi abasebethengisa impahla ejiyeneyo. Sikhuluma nje ke umnumzana uIgnatius Chombo yena ongumphathintambo wogatsha lukahulumende lokukhangelana lamadolobho uthi abantu laba kumele besuke kuthi kutshanje isonto kungasela muntu ozabonakala esezitaladini kuthi nxa kungenzwanga khonokho kuzangena ke ibutho lesizwe kumbe kungene lamapholisa aqotsha abantu ke blessing. So kodwa bakhona bathi amapholisa ukuthi angene, amasotsha ukuthi angenele akulunganga ngoba nganga amapholisa ngakuyazwakala. Kodwa abaningi bathi inkinga ekhona ukuthi umnotho welizwe kawumanga kuhle. So lokho kudingwa ngabantu bakahulumende ukuthi babophise abantu abazithengiselayo nje ngwane bathi bachaya eceleni. So kumele balungise umnotho. Siyakhumbula ukuthi ibandla leZANU-PF lathembisa ukuthi kuzaba nemsebenzi 2 million ngo-2013 kodwa sikhuluma nje imisebenzi yaphela, amakampani avalwa, into ezinjalo. So sifuna ukuzwa ngani izulu kandaba ukuthi kambe libona njani lolu udaba. Nasi inombolo lifone kanye salifonela khona ngapho lapha khona. Inombolo ke zithi 1-202-619-2077. Uthani liphindele futhi khona ngapho esimbumbumbu duzane la Gwanda phela. Kuzobuya khona ngapho ke eMount Darwin leDotito. Vulana ama radio lilalele phela. Nansi ke inombolo 1-202-619-2077. Lifone kanye salifona khona ngapho.
And I think, Gibbs, we have our first guest, that is Mr. Dumisani Nkomo, an independent political analyst. Mr. Nkomo, good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thanks for joining us. Gibbs, you can start the ball rolling.
Mr. Nkomo, by Sunday, no vendor should be on the streets of Bulawayo, Gweru, you talk of Harare, especially in the central business districts. What's your take on this thing?
I think the problem of vendors is a symptom of the collapse of the economy. So what should be addressed is the collapse of the economy, is the collapse of industry, is the lack of investment. People are just trying to make a living by getting onto the streets. But if there were jobs, if there was employment, if the factories were still operating and there was sufficient investment, those people would not be on the street. So really trying to get rid of them is just dealing with the symptoms of a deeper problem. It's only driving the problem underground. So I think really Chombo really missed it there, because the problem is that of unemployment. The problem is that of a collapsed economy, and not the vendors. The vendors are just a symptom. Nobody is saying that they should sell anyway. But the point is, it's just a symptom.
But
of a bigger problem.
Mr. Nkomo, we also see that the government has been tolerating this for a long time. Of course, they say if a leopard wants to eat its young ones, it will first accuse them of smelling like goats. What has prompted the government to evict the vendors at this juncture?
It's difficult to figure that out. But remember, it's not the first time. The way the Operation Murambachuna in 2005. So it's nothing new. And again, Operation Murambachuna appeared to be an operation spearheaded by the Joint Operations Command, which is the case again. They may be thinking that the vendors may pose a security threat or whatever. But whatever the case is, it's unjustifiable. Again, it's not something new. They've done it before. They may do it again, even though the Minister of Defense has said the army will not be involved in that operation. So it's something that they may do, but it would be very politically suicidal for them to do that.
Thank you so much. We'll see if it's going to be political harakiri. Gibbs.
Now we're joined by the National Director of the National Vendors Union Zimbabwe, and that is Mr. Samuel Wadzayi. Mr. Wadzayi, good evening and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. We can hear some very good music in the background. So we know it was a Friday, right?
Yeah.
Are you at Mereki or somewhere else?
Sorry?
Are you at Mereki? You know Mereki?
No, I'm not at Mereki. I'm at Iduriro.
All right, I think you get quiet.
Okay, Mr. Wadzayi, what is the latest now? the army today came out, that is the Minister of Defense, came out to say the army is not going to be involved in the eviction of vendors come Monday. Are you relieved?
No, I cannot say we are relieved. We expected them to do that. Naturally, we expected them to do that because that's what the Constitution says. The reason why we are not excited is that we never wanted the army to be involved in socio-economic issues. We never wanted them to be involved in issues that relate to vendors, because we feel that as vendors, we have got authorities that we relate to directly. Those are local authorities. And if there is any need for policing, there are municipal police to deal with that. So it's not something that we can celebrate about. Why should we celebrate about that? If they were going to come, we're going to receive them. But we feel their withdrawal is neither here nor there. They were just supposed not to interfere in the work of vendors.
Mm-hmm. And we also understand the authorities were planning a crackdown of some sort. Is this true?
Hello?
Yes, I'm saying we understand the authorities were planning a crackdown of some sort. And we might have to ask you to move a bit, Mr. Wadzayi. There's a lot of feedback.
I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, because where you are, it's a bit noisy. If you can move.
Breaking.
Okay, we'll call you back, Mr. Wadzayi.
Okay.
Okay, Gibbs.
Yeah, okay, I think he's in a noisy place there. So let's get back to you, Baba Nkomo. Nxa usukhangele udaba lolu lokususwa kwabantu laba abathengisa ezitaladini, kambe ungathi ke akunukisa ntungwane khonapho kumbe akho yini okuchaya amanzi amnyama nxa usukhangele wena?
Ya, mbona zani kumele sikhangele imbangela yokuthi abantu laba wayebekhona bethengisa ezigidini. Lokhu kubangela ukuthi akula msebenzi, ama-factories sewavalwa, so ingakho ke abantu sebezama ukuthi bephile ngokuthengisa. Yebo yesibili ngabe bethengisa endaweni ezingafanelanga, kodwa ngabe kulama-company, ngabe kulama-factory, ngabe kule msebenzi, ngabe abantu laba abakho vele ngathi esitidini. So insuku imali ayitholakali. So umbona zani ukuzama ukuthi bengabi khona, ukuzama ukuthi angazi engxenye uhulumeni ucabanga ukuthi engxenye abantu laba bengahlupha nxa kwaba lama demonstration ngaba njani angazi, but kungani into ehambelana lomrambathwina. Inkulumo enkona inkulumo kaMrambathwina shebini.
So according to Mr. Dumisani Nkomo, there are no jobs, so people have no alternative. So the best thing is to just go onto the street, sell whatever you have. That's it.
Rega tende umterero wedu kutanga ari ku South Africa. Makadi Mkoma Tonderal.
Ndiri Mkoma Blessing muisei.
Aiwa ini ndiri nani zvangu. Mkoma Tonderal dambudziko iri muri kuriona sei? Pogadziriswa sei?
Mkoma Blessing zvinosiririsa umwangu. Hondo iri munyika ukaenda pamushapa hauna kana nzira inobudisa mari yaunowana kana zviite sei kusiya kwekutengesa. Ukabuda paport of entry bet bridge, zvinhu zvinotengeswa zvese kuZimbabwe zviri kubva muSouth Africa muno. Vanhu vanorambidzwa kubudisa zvinhu izvozvo. Asi mota dzemashefu dzinobuda dzakazara dzisina kana any punch of search. Zvonzi zvinhu zvinobva kunoko zvimajemowa yeye chakazodai. Vanhu vari kuzamawo kuti vazviwanire upenyu muHarare, Bulawayo kapa kupi muZimbabwe mese. Kuuraya baba. Ndiri kuti wakataura wakuru wemauto. Mauto edu anodzirira hondo yevavengi vanouya vachizotirwira nekutirwisa muZimbabwe, kwete kuponda zvizvarwa zveZimbabwe. Mauto aya ndeeZimbabwe, haasi mauto ewanhu ba. Kana vakateerera vakuru venyika yedu
isusu tinoda nyika yedu yezimbabwe ndo nyika yedu yechizvarwa. Ngavambosiya vanhu vatengese chero pese panosvikika munhu achitengesa muHarare kana kupi. Vanhu vari kutambura Mukoma Blessing.
Ko vamwe kamukoma Tonderai ko vamwe vari kuti ka hatingarege vanhu vachita madiro aJorgina ivo vakuru vehurumende ava nekuti muguta macho hamuchatsikike.
Hakuna zvakadaro. Dai kwaya kuri kwekuti pane any government institute iri kushanda parasektor dzakafa dzese dzakadirika hapana basa. Private sectors ese avhara hapana chiri kushanda. Waya wataimboti vesecurity kana havana chekusachengeta pamidhuri yacho zvaangoti kugara zvakadaro zvisina basa. Kana kufudza mombe kwako hakuchabatsiri vaMukoma Blessing. Mombe dzakatofa nenzara hakuna chiriko. Kana hapana solution iri muZimbabwe ingaitwe nemunhu mutema ari munyika yeZimbabwe kusiyana kwekutengesa. Vanhu vese vane madhigirii, wakafunda wasina kufunda zvazvangofanana, hakuna pasvina musiyano Mukoma Blessing. Hapana muguta muri kunzima hamuna mafambikiro navakuru ava, asi kuti varida kurambidza, vane pfungwa yekuti nguva inotengesa vanhu ava munzira umu ndo nguva yavanogona kusangana, nekuti wazama kuda kuti vaputse kufamba nemamuvhmendi eopposition wakutadza. Tarisambone kudzingana kwavari kuita nekurwisana kwavari kuita nekungoparadzana kwavari kuita imomo muchinhu tiri kutonga umu. Hamuchisina chichimo chichagonwa kuti chiitwe navanhu ava. Saka nhau iripo ndeyekuti tiri kuti ngavaregere vanhu vatengese. Wofa here?
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru Mukoma Tonderai nekupinda muchirongwa chedu.
Ndinotenda Mukoma Blessing, vakuru vedu ngavatinzwisisei zviro kwazvo, nyika ndeyedu.
Tinotenda zvikuru.
Tatenda Mukoma Blessing.
Of course, Tonderai is appealing to government leaders to heed the call by vendors to at least suspend this operation, because he's saying the situation is desperate. This is why people have resorted to selling their wares in the streets.
I think Mr. Samuel Wadzayi is back, and that is the director of the National Vendors Union Zimbabwe. Mr. Wadzayi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Now the phone is very, very clear. I thought you were playing Chitekete, right? now tell us. Yes, at a certain place, right? So now tell us, what is the situation like in Harare? We're told yesterday that there were some kind of prayers, overnight prayers and something like that. So what is going on?
Well, people are very anxious, about after the declaration by Minister Chombo. Everyone knows that the reason why Zimbabwe is still up and running is because of the capacity of Zimbabwe to work for themselves. And how have they been doing that? They decided to go into vending. So people got confused, and there's a lot of anxiety when the government made the pronouncement that they want to remove vendors. And we find it very clear, very eccentric. Why does the government want to do that? So, our faith, faith colleagues from the religion, from the church, they decided to start to pray. Probably, these guys from the government can realize that what they want to do is not only against the Constitution, but against also what the Bible says. And we hope the prayers we had last night can really aid in terms of changing the mindset of our leaders. I'm talking about the government here.
But Mr. Wadzayi, some retailers are concerned that the vendors have virtually taken over their businesses. Meanwhile, they are paying taxes. They also have employees.
Those retailers should be reminded that vendors are also paying taxes. Vendors are paying between $2 and $5 to local authorities throughout the country, and it's not up to them to make such claims. We have tried to engage them. We have tried to to see how we can correct the situation. I mean, it's not, we don't accept a scenario where vendors go in front of retailers' shops and they start to sell their wares. But we are saying this is a desperate situation, which means everyone on board, we need to engage each other and start to talk about this issue so that we find common ground. I've talked to many of these retailers, and I felt that they appreciate the plight of vendors, and I felt that they want to engage. I felt that they are prepared to assist us in terms of getting, everything organized as far as vending is concerned. So we don't want them to be crybabies. They know the situation in the country. Vendors are the ones that are buying from their shops. If they think vendors are their enemies, it's just wrong. We need just to sit down and see how we can together address this problem without antagonizing anyone.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are just joining us, good evening. And this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the government ultimatum that vendors must leave the streets by Sunday or risk being evicted by Monday. The local government minister earlier threatened to use the military to evict the vendors. But of course, today, Defense Minister Dr. Sidney Sekiramai came out to say, no, the army is not going to be involved. So it's most likely that the government will deploy the Zimbabwe Republic Police, and the council might also be forced to deploy the council police officers. Gibbs, rekaitende kuva tereri, unani partner.
Ye, ilo mnumzana ke Nkomo osegoli. Baba Nkomo, ungaunjani?
Asiyapula njani?
Ye, kunjani lapho khona lapha eGoli?
Hayi Goli kumnandi.
Ye, nantu daba baba. Sokumele lapha abathengisayo besuke ezitaladini, ungathini kona?
Into ezisibuhlungu kakhulu gift itenge encane engala future lama ithengise ezitaladini. Bale bhadi abantwana labo ngoba bazalele elizweni elingala government. Elizweni elingala mali yayo ukuthi ngenye ihistory umntwana ezelizolo ufana lo mntwana wazala ngesikhathi salokudengula ngoba ilizwe lalingala mali eyayo. Bengise Harare 2 weeks ago kunzima kakuhambeki lapha emarket sikuye kungcele kuyesabeka abantwana babantu abala government ezabancedisa lako kulawo kuyafana kuyesabeka bengaze bebakhuphe bebafake lapha bengaze besebenze khona imali abayithola lapha ngikuthi besupport abanye abantu kodwa impilo zabo zifile abantu bekhaya lapho mbona ngani into abangayenza ake sihlakanipheni ke sivotela izapho ngo2018 sikhiphe yonke idoti le lapha ekhaya ngalokho esilakho lapha ngeke ukusise ndawo singahlala 20 years from now akulampilo even A1 abantu bezazi bathi bafundile bafunda istory samanga ephepheni ama industry kubulawayo avaliwe kuthiwa kulabo professor kulabantu abalama degree those degrees zifana nama tissue ngoba abebayise kungena be-operate ama-company lana abelungu bahamba why bengangeni be-operate the only way ake sitry izaphu notribalism sibona izaphu iphethe idokumenti engancedisa umphakathi lo ngalokho kulapho abantu ukuthi ufuna ukubusilize lokhu sesikubona lokuningi iminyaka leminyaka it's a waste of time into ngeke isincede ngalutho abantwana labo bengazi bakhuphe baba abalampilo bengazi behlale ezitaladeni yazi kuyesabeka lapha eHarare kuyesabeka kakuhambeki ngani izinyosi abalampilo bahle ku raise idola kunzima the only way asivoteni izaphu bese ngicela ukuphuma mbijana kubulawayo lapha
10 seconds
kulama by election ngiyaqoza kakhulu kulama by election sicela laba abantu ababuya lebhasi labo siyakwazi ngabantu begazi labana abantu abababulala ngo1983 ngeGugurawundo sibavote out yayina lo ohambo wabacela ngo1983 babemenza i-distance lamhlanje sihambe ebadonsa njengotiti semuvo ithina bezomsupporta kobulawayo ebhasini ehayenda bantu kobulawayo ake lihlakaniphe libakhuphe labo bantu
ye ibhera sitshayele lapha baba Nkomo sibongile kakhulu ukuthi ubuye lamhlanje ube lempela viki enhle kakhulu njalo phenduke ngeviki ezayo baba
ngikhona
Yes, well, Nkomo. Yeah, what Mr. Nkomo is saying is that, most of the vendors are very unfortunate because they were born at the wrong time. He says Zimbabwe doesn't have its own currency. Zimbabwe doesn't have a functional economy. Zimbabwe is almost dead, according to him. So he says the government is not even prepared to assist these people to actually make a decent living. So now they're chasing them from the streets. So he says at the end of the day, people must vote for ZAPU. I think he may be a ZAPU supporter. And he says there are some people who claim to have degrees. Those degrees are useless. Why not revive industries? That's his take.
Interesting. Rega tiende kune mumwe muteereri vadongo makadii?
Hello.
Makadii zvenyu?
Ndivadongodongo.
Vadongodongo. Makadii zvenyu?
Ndinofara zvangu makadii.
Aiwa tiripo nyaya iri mudariro mainzwa.
Nyaya iri mudariro ndainzwa iyi kubvira mazuva ese ndichinzwa hangu.
Munoona sei?
Nyaya yainaombira mushe. Munoziva let's look back muna 2005. It's a repetition of what has happened. Muna 2005 makaitwa inonzi operation Rambatsine yakapedza kudestroy everything zvaingoitika saizvozvo. Matuckshop akagara mumaguta, vanhu vaiita zvinhu zvese vainazvo zvikapera kupwanyiwa kupwanyiwa. Zvabva ipapapo that when you see kuti pakatanga kugadzirwa mari dzemapepa zvisina mazita handini vatsoni kuona kufumi ikoko. This is the same thing that we are kurepeat futhi the same mistake. One and kana kupinda misoko norodukura kuti makati vanozviona here varikuzviona here.
Saka muri kungoti zvakafanana neoperation Murambatsvina?
Zvakatofanana because kukura kuita ikoko.
Vadongodongo, fambai pamuri foni yenyu inenge hatichanyidzwe zvakanaka.
Ndiri kuti kurarama kwangofanana nekwauchikuita vanhu kaikoko. Kana kurarama kwacho kwakavadhistidiwa ivo vari kukomplaina vachiti mastop meta hamusi kutengwa ndobhizinesi saka vadzii saka varikutengesesipo inobva kupi?
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru nekupinda muchirongwa chedu.
Vakomana, that's very embarrassing. Because the ultimatum shoko ranoshandiswa kuti ultimatum rinowanikwa pati kumerore. Rinowanikwa pati nderekuti we are in a world of civilization. We don't have to use some of those strong words.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru. Okay, of course, like most of our callers, Mr. Dongodongo is not a happy citizen of Zimbabwe. He's saying, this is taking exception to the use of the word ultimatum. He's saying that must not be used, especially when people are not gainfully employed. Gibbs.
Just a few words, Mr. Nkomo, before we take a break. What do you think about what the caller was saying?
I totally agree with the callers because the issue of the vendors is just a symptom of a failed economy. It's a symptom of failed governance. It's a symptom of failed policies. I mean, they've promised hundreds of thousands of jobs after the elections. Those jobs are not there. And because the jobs are not there, people have gone onto the street to try and survive. Now, to threaten those people for trying to survive really is hypocrisy of the highest order.
Thank you very much, and stay on the line, Mr. Nkomo.
Yes, and Mr. Wadzayi, please do stay on the line. And for our radio listeners, unfortunately, it ends here. But the good news is we are streaming live. So go to www.voazimbabwe.com and press on LiveTalk. This is Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Gibbs Dube saying stay tuned to Zimbabwe. Don't forget the number if you want to join the show right now, 1-202-619-2077. That number again, 001-202-619-2077.
for those of you who are just joining us, good evening, and this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about a government directive that close to 5.6 million vendors that are said to be selling their wares in the streets of most capital cities in the country must move by Sunday or risk being evicted forcibly by security forces on Monday. Of course, there are conflicting reports from the army. First, Brigadier General Anselm Sanyatwe told the vendors that they must move or the army will deal with them. But the next day, the Defense Minister, Dr. Sidney Sekeramai, came out and say the government, or rather the army, was not going to be involved in the eviction of the vendors. Of course, as a human rights group said, pointed out earlier in the week, it is unconstitutional for the army to intervene in such cases unless the situation has deteriorated to a certain point. And of course, President Robert Mugabe himself has to give that directive. Gibbs.
And of course, our guest tonight, Mr. Dumisani Nkomo, who is an independent political commentator based in Bulawayo. We also have Mr. Samuel Wadzayi, the National Director of the National Vendors Union of Zimbabwe. If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. You can also send us a message on WhatsApp. The number is 1-202-465-0318. Yeah, such as avoid.
Indeed, and just how many vendors are in Harare, Gibbs? The town clerk, Dr. Tendai Mahachi, is saying there are 20,000 vendors in Harare. But listen to this. The National Vendors Union Zimbabwe is saying they have 100,000 members in Harare only.
So which means there's something wrong somewhere.
Welcome to Zimbabwe. If you are not confused, then you are not paying attention.
That's it.
Indeed.
So definitely, I think there is a very serious problem. You still remember the last general election? I mean the census.
Yes.
You know, the number of people in Bulawayo, it varies every kind of census.
Exactly.
And the variance is unbelievable, according to Mr. Nkomo as well. He has said something about it in the past. So let's get back to you, Mr. Nkomo, as well. You know, we were talking about what the caller was saying, but now let's focus on what Blessing is saying. The Vendors Association of the Vendors Union is saying there are 100,000 vendors in Harare. Yet the Harare City Council is saying no, they're less than that. You know, far less than that. What is the problem here?
I think it's a problem of trying to maybe deny reality. The truth might be somewhere in between, between the 20,000 and the 100,000. But it's quite clear that there's a lot of informal activities. I mean, even if you went to the trade fair this year, it was a giant flea market itself. And, you know, the trade fair is the reflection of the state of the economy. And yet, if you went to all five, it was full of, you know, people in the informal sector, which reflects that, you know, the large bulk of the economy has been informalized. And that is, but now you go to Kweru, I mean, the economy is totally, you know, informalized. That's the reality on the ground.
Regai tidzoke kuna vawadzayi saka zviri kufamba sei nemusi wemuvhuro muri kuudzwa kuti kudii nemapurisa?
chokwadi chiripo ndechekuti mavhenda hapana kwari kuenda musi wemande. Kana pane chatogona kuitika ndechekuti vachatouya vakawanda kupfuura vanga vagara varipo mutauni muCBD area yemuharare. Nokuti mafungiro edu nemaonero edu atiri kuita seunion varoda kutanga kuita process iri muharare. Mavhenda takaita public meeting yedu iya da kunzwawo maviews avo, nokuti vanhu vaigona kufunga kuti zvirongwa zvawadzai kana kuti zvirongwa zvenavhusi, utungamiri hwenavhusi. Mavhenda akauya akataura ega kuti isusu hapana kwatiri kuenda, nokuti kwatiri kunzi tiende kwacho vanhu hakukwane tu kwagara kutori nevanhu vatoriko. Saka
the vendors will remain in their spaces. Hazvina zvazinondibatsira kuti nditye mupurisa nokuti akabata pfuti ndichienda kumba pandinotarisana nemwana wangu tisina chikafu chandinomupa. Tinofanirwa kuremembwa negovernment yedu ndechekuti mavhenda zviri kurarama nedhola mazuva or 50 cents in some cases. Saka tinopinda mutauni paya every day tinenge tichitangoita dhola iroro kana $2 iyoyo toriritira mhuri. Hatina chikombe chatinoda kutsvaga nokuti ivo vakafeila kutibatsira havasi kukwanisa kuvhura vaindustry. 7 days ultimatum yavakapa isusu tiri kuvapawo 7 days ultimatum yekuvhura maindustry. Kana vakavhura maindustry within 7 days idzodzo tobuda musisi vanoona makachena. Kana vasina kuvhura maindustry hapana kwatiri kuenda.
Very
Interesting. Of course, like Mr. Wadzayi is saying, the country is now run by ultimatums.
Yes.
The government has given them a 7-day ultimatum to leave the streets.
And they are
giving it a 7-day ultimatum to create jobs. Tina vadhube parunare, makadi vadhube.
Tiripo edu makadiva.
Aiwa tiripo. Muri kuona sei nyaya yevanotengesa zvinhu mumugwagwa?
Vanotengesa zvinhu mumugwagwa vanhu vakanaka zvikurusa. Vezvitoro vari kuchema vachiti ivo vari kutorerwa makastoma. Asi chavanokanganwa ndechekuti vezvitoro nevari kutengesa mumugwagwa vese vanoda kurarama. Saka hurumende ndiyo ine basa rekuti igadzise zvinhu izvozvo. Tine makambanizi anga achishanda muno, vana Zisco, vana Lancashire Steel, migodhi yakawandisa yakavhara. Vanhu vari mumigwagwa makambani akavhurwa vanoenda kumakambani vonoshanda. Saka chinhu chakakosha kuhurumende yedu kuti ngaitange yagadzirisa pekuti vanhu vaende, then yozoita sei yozovabvisa. Nekuti vari kutengesa kuti mhuri dzavo dzirarame. Vari kudzinga vana vechikoro muzvikoro, vari kuisa mitemo yakawanda iri kuomera vanhu, iri kusunga vanhu. Asi havasi kugadzirisa pekuti vanhu vaende. Saka ini ndiri kuti kuhurumende especially kuna ivo Minister Chombo kana ari munhu anofunga ane njere chaidzo ngavatange vagadzirisa pekuti vanhu vaende kuti vawane kurarama. Ivo vari kurarama nekuti ndiminista vari kuwana mari vachidya nemhuri yavo vachifara. Asi tine vanhu vasina pekuraramira, vasina kana chekubata, vari kununga susu nemuromo vasina kana chekudya. Hapana munhu anombofadzwa nekushanda ari mustreet. Mune vanhu vakadzidza ma A level vane macourses but havana kwekuvaseenzesera. That's why vachienda murodi. Saka dai vaigona kunzwa Minister Chombo zvandiri kutaura panapa, dai vaizvigona kuzvinzwisisa izvozvi, takagumbuka zvikurutsa vana veZimbabwe. Nekuti hurumende ZANU-PF iri kuita zvinhu zvekungombunyikidza vanhu nekubatra vanhu vachiisa zvimitemo zvinangana nebasa rese, asi ivo vachirarama vachifadza mhuri dzavo. Vana vavo vachidzidza kunze kwenyika kune varungu vacho vavakadzinga muno vavari kuti vapambezwe.
Asi kanhai vadhube vakuru vanoti nhamo zvayo mai havarodzwi, vachiti mugwagwa macho migwagwa yeHarare yacho haichafambike, vamwe vanga vachiti maakutogochwa chibage muna First Street.
Ichokwadi nekuti zvazvakuita izvo ndezvokuti chero umwe achitoita tsvina apa umwe achitogocha chibage apa, asi nhau hombe iripo ndeyekuti ari kuita tsvina ari kuda kubatsirikana nekuti pekuiitira hapana. Ari kugocha chibage ari kuda kuti mwana awanewo chekurarama nekuti haana pekushanda. Saka ivo sehurumende yakamirira yakapromisa amene hanzi ma1000 mangani emabasa,
2 million jobs.
Mabasa iwayo munhu mumwe nemumwe aende panzvimbo yake pakafanira, vanoona guta richichena.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru vadhube nekupinda muchirongwa chedu.
Izvezvi ndisati ndaenda hangu ini ndiri kuGokwe. Kune situation yakaoma kwedu kuGokwe neMango. Kotoni dziri mumba, takanunga minda yese hapaisina kana munda une kotoni. Kotoni dzakazara right. Kotoni chinhu chinobvira chiri too flammable zvokuti mwana akamboita mistake vanhu vakuwara, mbatya dzinenge dzatsva, asi hapana kana kotoni iri kutengwa. Zvinorevei tobvawo futi toenda mumigwagwa kunotengesawo zvino zvinhu nekuti hatina chekuita, ndopatinowana mari ipapo. Asi vagere vachiti vanotiwanira mabasa, makambani acho iri kubata zvinhu ikoti koinova kambani yehurumende, asi hapana kana action yavari kutora.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru vadhube, tichaedza kuti tikufonere tichimbonzwa kuti zviri kufamba sei padambudziko rimwe ramasimudza rekotoni iri.
Aiwa, tinotenda baba, mukapotawo muchitibata tinofara zvikurusa nekuti kune zvakawanda zvatinoshiva kutaurawo nemi.
Aiwa, chirongwa ndechenyu, tinotenda zvikuru, tichakufonera itombonzwa kuti zvakamira 1-1.
aiwa zvakanaka inoita basa
tinotenda. Of course, Mr. Dube is joining the growing list of our callers who are saying the government must simply create employment for the people instead of kicking out people who are trying to earn an honest living. Gibbs.
Yes, I think we are joined by Mr. Strike Mnkandla, who is the ZAPU spokesperson based in Bulawayo. Mr. Mnkandla, good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you very much. Tell us, what is your take on this vendors issue, their removal from the streets by Monday?
Well, in the first place, you have to say, what is the hurry, what is the spur? What was the situation before? Now, I think one of the most important issues now khangela babulalela ukuthi indawo ezinjengabo 5 streets zazivele zidemarketiwe ukuthi ukufitaving rather kwakudemarketiwe ukuthi lapha leli bhokisi kuhlala ubani kulama payments enziwayo ku-6,000. Now osokusenzakala ukuthi sokusuka isiqhobeqhobe lo ukuthi inqumbi yakhe awuthelela inqumbi yakhe. I think into yokuqala ukuthi lo asomsebenzi kahulumeni umsebenzi we-council nxa isisindwa yilowo msebenzi then singathela ukukhulumeni ayikho ukuthi kuyekhuluma uminister utshogo khona le phezulu ngazi ukuthi wayezivonile inqumbi zempahla lapha ezithithi. So that's an issue in itself. Okwesibili nxa kukhona okuhluphayo kunjengalokho akudingi ukuthi qabuze edinga umbutho ngathi sekule-MP edolobheni ukuthi ususe abantu abazithengisela inqumbi zempahla zabo. Okwesithathu akulaqiniso futhi ukuthi abanye abantu laba babevelile zebelethwe ngubani. Enye into esiyikhangeleyo thina ngesikhathi leso sokhetho yikuthi akulabanye abantu yini abayimvukuzana abalethelwe khonokho ukuthi bazehlala kuze kufike ukhetho bese besiyajoyina ukhetho bengalaa ndawo abahlala kuzo edolobheni. So ziningi izinto ezisimangalisayo ngokuphatheka kwabantu labo abaphathekanga isikhathi. Okwesibili kuyamangalisa ukuthi vuthu ngevili yona yale kubuye kube labantu abaningi kakhulu abangaziwa ukuthi bavelana. So ziningi izinto esizithathile.
Yeah, so ngamafitshane-ke ngesikhiwa singathi what do you think could be the impact of this in terms of ZANU-PF politics? Can this change anything in Zimbabwe?
Well, it should change eventually because I think it just goes to underline the gravity of the crisis. That instead of dealing with the macro issues, people are going to manage the strict economy of vendors. I think that should be not the preoccupation of government. It's the restoration of industry, restoration of decent employment and opportunities for young people and for self-employed people like some of the women who are trying to pay fees for their children. So there are many issues there which really underlie a policy failure and the misdirected priorities. I think that there are better things for government to do instead of fiddling with local issues to that extent.
And Mr. Nkomo, the involvement of the army in all this, of course, you have one Brigadier General Sanyatwe saying the army is going to be involved, and then you have the Defense Minister, Dr. Sekeramai, like pilot, washing his hands off this expected showdown between government and vendors. What is happening here?
I think it could be two things. Number one, it could be a manifestation of the factionalism within ZANU-PF. With one faction trying to align itself with the electorate. And then the other thing is that it is also policy inconsistency. I mean, this government has been consistently inconsistent in terms of policy implementation. We have one minister saying this and another minister saying another thing. So this is just symptomatic of a government that is not consistent in terms of policy articulation, in terms of policy formulation, in terms of policy implementation. And this has been the case consistently for over 20 years. So it's clearly a demonstration of policy inertia and policy confusion and factionalism as well within the ruling party. You know, it's just epitomizes the confusion that has been there over the past 15 to 20 years in this country.
I think we've got some messages, Blessing, on Facebook, and one of the messages is from Godfrey Story, who writes, provide jobs and then remove vendors. The reason why there are many vendors on the streets is that there are no jobs in Zimbabwe. Then Nelson writes, Zimbabwe is an amazing country. If you ask government officials about unemployment, they tell you that the unemployment rate is 11%. But where are all these vendors coming from? Give them jobs, please. Coming back to you, Baba Nkomo. Uzwe ngazani nxa abantu bekhuluma khonapho eZimbabwe kukhulunywa ngakhona kudaba lwabantu abathengisayo kambe bathi luyaphela njani?
Bona zona abantu abaningi bazwa ubuhlungu kakhulu ukuthi nxa kusola komsebenzi sebethengisa sebetshela ukuthi kumele bephume esitridini. Mbona zani abantu laba bengasusa esitridini sibili hayi kungaba kubi sibili kubandla elibusayo nxa sisiya phambili ngoba into lesizondisa abantu sibili kakhulu so njengokuthunuka isilonda esibhebhidlayo isilonda siyini sikusolakala kwemsebenzi isilonda kuyini kuyivalwa kwamafactory so abantu sibili babuhlungu bazondile ngendaba le bangaqhubeka sibukhulume ngaqhubekeza ukufenza iqhinga leli hayi kuzaba nzimela sibili sisiya phambili.
So Mr. Nkomo says, what is being done by the government is totally unfair because, the factories are closed and, where do people go from now,
Mr. Mnkandla, but there are some retailers who are complaining that the vendors are now a nuisance.
Well, you see, I think that you shouldn't put the cart before the horse. The vendors are compelled to become a nuisance because there isn't much else they can do. The city is limited insofar as you have the chance to put up things on the pavement. You can't do that in every street. If you know, like I see in Blawas, you have the previously designated points for small traders and so on, the vendors. But now those areas are expanding and escalating. So they haven't gone to every part of the city, but they've expanded where they were previously properly managed and designated. And now, because of this influx of new vendors, they are encroaching on the streets, let alone the pavement. They're actually encroaching on the street, and cars are having to navigate carefully in some of the streets. In fact, sometimes they even insult the drivers and say, why are you trying to crash our things, leave our spaces and so on, park somewhere else? Town is big. So that some areas will eventually become no-go areas unless something is really done to facilitate the work of the vendors and to ensure that while they ply, they are not so lucrative and not so, second way of living. At least something is done to make it easier and to be less of a nuisance to the driving public and to road safety. So I think there are a lot of issues there. You can't blame the vendors as such, but at the same time, you can see that the pressure on them is going to really grow, and it will make it difficult for the city authorities, particularly, to control the pressure. And I think that if government is going to have any role at all, is to assist the councils to play their rightful role of regulating the trade and ensuring that the vendors have more decent facilities to ply their trade. So I don't know if I'm answering you there, but I think that the issue isn't just one of nuisance or one of lack of opportunities, but it's a combination so that vendors can do what they have to do. Because if I've seen some of the women these days, and I ask them, where did you get these things? They've been all sorts of places. They've been to Tanzania, they've been to Mozambique, and of course, increasingly, they are going to South Africa as well. So they are actually going to a lot of trouble to procure the things that they are selling. And yet, the conditions are getting more difficult on the ground.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mnkandla, and please do stay on the line. And, I also like Zimbabweans have a great sense of humor. So they are saying somebody was being asked, to comment on the eviction or the forcible removal of the vendors from the streets. So he was asked, what's your comment? And he said, I don't like this discrimination. Why are they not, why are they only kicking out the vendors, the vendor, not the Shonas and the Beles?
Only my vendor.
That's Zimbabwe for you, always something humorous, although,
Like,
it's something that is really serious.
Like that saying, we died for this country.
Oh yes. Rikatiende kuBotswana kuna Mkoma George. Makadi Mkoma George. Aiwa tiripo hedu Mkoma George. Nyaya mainzwa Mkoma George tira kubvisa mavhenda mumugwagwa.
Mandere nemashona vacharamba.
Ani mari kubvisa mandere nemashona.
Ndikada mandere nemashona vacharamba. Ndazvinzwisisa hangu zvamunotaura nyaya yedu yatinayo mudariro umu. But ndinoona sokuti kana makambani anongoramba achingovhara, the only source yekuwana mari nayo kana kuva employed kutotengesa chawawana. Umwe ari kutengesawo nzungu, umwe atengesa nyimo. Whichever you get cheaper, you can go and resell somewhere. And munhu kuti atengese unoda market. Market ndopanopfuura newanhu. Ende kuti wadaro kuti wanhu vachanovaisira somewhere kana kwaita sekukokora kusina vanhu kunopindira mapostori kuda kuyo kote nemotengesera ikoko. Hakuna munhu anobva mutaundi achienda kunotenga kunoitira mapostori chechi kuya kuya. Munhu anotengesa ndiye anotoenda kune wanhu. Urikuona nyaya yacho? Saka ni hazviti, hanzi if Mahomad calls the mountain and the mountain doesn't come to Mahomad, Mahomad is go to the mountain. Saka ni zvinotoitika nezvekutoti vanhu vanotengesa ndovanoenda kune vanhu. Ndosaka nezvichinzi isiti because munhu anotengesa anoenda kwakatowakwa kudhara kune vanhu ikoko. Saka nezvavari kuita izvo vachikutotamba ndokunonzi kutamba nemadhaka. Hazviite. Nekuti vanhu vakawanda kana mutaura imimi kuti 3.5 million vakutengesa.
5.6 million.
5.6 million. So each day we are adding probably 1,000. So as the economy goes dry, everybody is looking for something to sell. Iwe kana usisina kana chekudya mumba mako uchatora kana fridge yako unomira naye parodhi utsvaga munhu anoida. So you are vending. So kuva kuti economy yemuZimbabwe kuti istope kutengesa, is either one we start kutanga nekutoti isusu hatichadi kutengesa ma-second hand clothing, hatichadi kutengesa ma-second hand shoes, hatichadi izvo zvinobva kuChina, because China is creating unemployment in Africa. Because zvinhu zvese zviri kubva kuChina. So which means the local market cannot manufacture ichikompita nechinhu chakabva kuChina. So which means to say globalization has got a very big impact on local economy. Because vari kuneseka, it's either vachatoregera kutomanufacture because zvinhu zvinenge zvichibva kuri very cheap zvichiuya kune zvinhu kunodhura. So vanhu vaya vane mari futi vanenge vachimhanya notenga kuChina. Muri kuona futi wakuru vanomhanya notenga kuChina vouya futi vachiita resell. But vanhu vanenge vasina mari ndo vanenge vachirestrictwa kuenda kutenga kuChina. So which means to say economical liberalization in a lot to do with a lot of vending. Like economy in Zimbabwe, kurova kuti haichina chaicha manufacture. Everybody wari kuya kuBotswana ine zvavagwetinji vachangoperera muFrancistown vachenga zvinhu zvavo vachidzokera. Vamwe vanotangira muMessina, vari kunotora mabheri kuMozambique, vari kunotora mabheri kuZambia, kuCongo. You see, so local economy haicha function. Plus I think kuti zvavanoda kubvisa vanhu zvichakonzera kuti zana yacho ibviswe pachigaro nevanhu, because now it will be a tide against the ruling vanenge va a few. Which means it's a good idea kuti vabvise vanhu munzira.
Aiwa tinokutenda zvikuru Mkoma George.
Alright, ndatenda.
Aiwa tinotenda zvikuru. George seems to be an economic historian, the way he's reasoning and telling us about the underdevelopment theory. But of course he's saying there are a lot of goods, particularly from China, that are flooding the Zimbabwe market, and this has forced most industries in Zimbabwe to actually close shop, and this is pushing people into the streets.
Right, the first one, let's go to Mr. Dumisani Nkomo. Mr. Nkomo, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm there.
Now, we've got a government that is financially constrained. At the same time, it's trying to push vendors out of the streets, but it's getting money from those vendors in the form of taxes, Does this make sense at all?
Right, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense because those very same vendors are consumers, which means some of the goods and services they procure, acquire, or buy somewhere directly or indirectly goes into the fiscus, because there's VAT. Whether it's we are buying food, whether we are buying clothes or whatever. So those vendors indirectly also contribute to the fiscus. They're consumers as well. So really, it doesn't make sense politically, economically, or sociologically. What they need to do is to try and regulate and control the movement and the traffic of people within respective CPDs, within local authorities, and not declare war on them, because it's not a war. These are citizens of Zimbabwe that need to be engaged, that need to work within the confines of the law, not the confines of war.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nkomo. And back to you, Mr. Mnkandla. Of course, the government is adamant that the vendors will move. Where will this end?
Right, before you ask me your question, can I say something? I heard someone here talking about China. Now, it is quite important to know that China is not just bringing affordable goods, but China is doing well. First of all, some substandard goods, number one. Number two, the Chinese prices are not possible, because if you see slippers coming from China selling for less than $1.50, the rubber that was used to produce them and the uppers of those slippers, plus the shipping, and if there's any customs dues being paid, it's impossible to actually lend that slipper here for less than $1.50. So there is something. First of all, that means those things are heavily subsidized from their point of origin. And certainly, unless they're produced by slave labor, they cannot actually be economically produced where they come from for our market. And thirdly, if our customs are properly done, there is no way those shoes or slippers can undercut a locally produced shoe. Here in Bulawayo, the people who used to produce some of those slippers, particularly the flip-flops, like Fair Branch, so a very thriving firm. But right now, the equipment is lying idle, and the workers have been laid off until the economic climate improves. So it's quite a stark reminder of what we should be doing to revive industry in terms of enabling local industry and facilitating export of our goods into each neighboring countries. Because right now, since our people are being paid peanuts, literally, they are selling peanuts. They're almost being sold for peanuts themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Mnkandla.
That we should fail to produce locally and be competitive in the region.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mnkandla.
In terms of the economic matrix.
Thank you. Unfortunately, time is not our best ally, and we have to end it here. And we want to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Mnkandla, Mr. Dumisani Nkomo, and also Mr. Samuel Wadzayi for joining us this evening. And of course, we want to thank our callers, our viewers, our team behind the scenes, our engineers and producers. Signing off and saying have a blessed weekend. This is yours truly, Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Kip Stube saying good night.